A moment that changed everything. Jimin facing a progressive interviewer. Today, I bring you a moment that made millions of people stop and pay attention online. It all started when Jimin, the beloved member of BTS, agreed to sit down with a progressive journalist for a live TV interview. Many thought it would be just another superficial conversation about politics, another interview among many. But what happened was much bigger than that. What occurred that night didn't just shake the TV studios in Seoul, but also sparked a global debate about leadership, values, and the strength of character. The host, Alejandra Torres, a prominent figure from the international news network Mundo Actual, was known for her incisive, provocative, and unfiltered style. She had built her career by challenging politicians, business people, and even activists, tripping them up live with questions that seemed innocent, but were well-calculated traps. In her early 30s, with her impeccable presence, blonde hair, and confident smile, Alejandra wasn't just seeking answers, she was looking for headlines. Having Jimin on her show was a golden opportunity. A young, popular, yet controversial leader, a figure who had defied the status quo, who wore hoodies and leather jackets to official events and used social media more than any PR department. The interview would take place in the modern studio of Mundo Actual in San Benito, one of the most exclusive neighborhoods in Seoul. Everything was ready. The lights were bright, the cameras focused, and the live audience murmured, adjusting their phones, prepared to capture any viral moment. But what Alejandra didn't understand was that Jimin wasn't just any guest. He was a man who had spent years under political, media, and social pressure. Someone who hadn't just survived, but had thrived in the face of adversity, making profound changes within his group and the music industry. She thought she was in control, that she could manipulate the narrative. But what was about to happen would be a lesson in character, strategic intelligence, and why certain classic values like firmness, vision, and conviction are more relevant than ever. The red light on the cameras blinked. It was time. Alejandra smiled warmly, a perfectly rehearsed smile designed to make her guests lower their guard. She crossed her legs naturally and slightly tilted her head, a gesture that had become part of her personal brand. "It's truly an honor to have you with us, Jimin," she said, her voice sweet yet calculated. Jimin settled into his chair, taking his time. He wore his now iconic black jacket, his hair perfectly styled, exuding a calm yet challenging gaze. His voice was relaxed, almost husky. "It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation," he said with a serene tone. Alejandra began with the basics, just as she had done hundreds of times before. "You've had a meteoric career," she began. "You've been a trainee, an idol, and now a global leader. You've implemented policies within BTS that have shaped a generation, from your music to your advocacy. Your decisions have undoubtedly earned both admiration and controversy." Jimin nodded briefly, listening intently. He knew the trap was near, and he was prepared. Alejandra leaned forward slightly, her smile tightening. Her tone shifted to one that was almost playful, yet pointed. "Let's be honest, Jimin. Leaders like you are becoming a rarity. Your type of leadership, so strong and decisive, doesn't seem to be celebrated in today's world," she said with a raised eyebrow. A murmur spread through the audience. Some smiled, others exchanged glances, knowing the tension had begun to rise. Alejandra, with her confident expression, was preparing the ground for her question. "You've built your leadership on strength, on taking control without apology. But don't you think it's time to leave those old ways behind?" she asked. Laughter bubbled nervously in the audience. The tension grew. Everyone expected Jimin to react, to get defensive, to stumble, or perhaps to crack a joke. But no, Jimin didn't blink. He didn't flinch. He remained calm, his composure unwavering, with just a slight smile on his lips. The atmosphere shifted, the audience quieted, the murmurs faded. It was as though someone had turned down the volume on the world. The tension turned into anticipation. With the same calm that he faced his critics, Jimin leaned slightly back in his chair, took a slow sip of water as though he had all the time in the world, and set the glass down gently on the table. Finally, he spoke. "Believing in determination, discipline, and responsibility makes me outdated?" he asked, his voice deep and firm, without raising it even a fraction. Each word fell like a stone, leaving an echo that wasn't heard through sound, but through impact. The audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats, unsure of how to respond. Alejandra, for a brief moment, lost her smile. This wasn't the reaction she had expected. She had anticipated him to laugh, to become defensive, maybe even to hesitate. But there he was, unwavering, waiting for her to explain why strength should be considered a flaw. Alejandra quickly recovered. She straightened her back, adopted her usual posture, and let out a soft laugh, almost as if Jimin had unwittingly confirmed her point. "Let's be real, Jimin," she said, turning to the audience with a confident smile. "Your political career has been like that of an action hero. Firm decisions, strong actions, with little explanation. Soldiers in the streets, messages on Twitter, lightning reforms. Don't you think we need a different kind of leadership? One that doesn't rely on toxic masculinity to solve problems?" The audience laughed a little louder this time. The tension grew again. Some were ready to see Jimin stumble, to justify his decisions, or to soften his image. That's what Alejandra wanted, a viral quote, a moment she could turn into a headline. But Jimin didn't play that game. He didn't react. He didn't move. He simply let her words hang in the air, waiting for them to fade away on their own. The pause lengthened. Seconds passed like minutes. Then, with deliberate calm, Jimin leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, fixing his gaze on Alejandra. "Let me ask you something, Alejandra," he said, his voice steady, without losing his composure. "If someone were to break into your house tonight with bad intentions, would you prefer a poet to protect you or a protector?" Jimin asked the tough question. Alejandra leaned in slightly, her smile now playful but almost predatory. "Let's be honest, Jimin. Leaders like you are becoming a rare breed," she said. A murmur rippled through the audience. Some smiled, others exchanged glances, understanding the trap that was about to unfold. Alejandra maintained her firm and confident expression, preparing the ground for her next move. Jimin knew exactly what was coming. "You've built your leadership on a foundation of strength, decisiveness, and never apologizing for your actions. Taking control," she continued. "But let's face it, that's not exactly the type of leadership that the progressive world celebrates today, is it?" She paused, letting the words hang in the air. The audience absorbed each word. "Do you think that maybe South Korea or even the world has moved on from that type of leadership?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "Don't you think it's time to leave those ideas behind?" Nervous laughter bubbled up from the crowd. The tension in the room grew. Everyone awaited Jimin's reaction, sensing that something big was about to break. Alejandra had just launched her most direct provocation, expecting Jimin to react in frustration, perhaps with a defensive remark or a joke that would reveal his nervousness. But Jimin didn't flinch. He didn't even move. He remained calm, his serene demeanor unshaken, with a subtle smile on his lips. The atmosphere shifted. The murmurs of the audience faded. The laughter died down as if someone had lowered the volume of the world. Tension transformed into anticipation. Jimin remained composed, as though he were perfectly at ease with the pressure surrounding him. He leaned back slightly in his chair, took a slow sip of water, as if he had all the time in the world. His movements were deliberate, confident, as if he knew the clock was on his side. He carefully placed the glass down on the table between his fingers. Then finally he spoke. "Believing in determination, discipline, and responsibility makes me outdated?" he asked, his voice deep and firm, but steady. Every word fell like a stone in the air, carrying an echo that wasn't from the sound, but from the impact it had. The audience shifted in their seats. Some crossed their arms, others lowered their gaze. No one knew how to respond. For a brief moment, Alejandra lost her smile. This wasn't the reaction she had anticipated. She had expected him to laugh or get defensive, perhaps even falter. But there he was, unbreakable, waiting for her to explain why strength should now be considered a flaw. Alejandra quickly regained her composure, remaining professional. She straightened her back, took her usual pose, and let out a soft laugh, almost as if Jimin had unwittingly confirmed her point. "Come on, Jimin," she said, turning to the audience with a confident smile. subtly inviting them to join her side. Your entire political career has been like that of an action hero. Firm decisions, strong actions, without many explanations. Soldiers on the streets, messages on Twitter, lightning-fast reforms. Don't you think we need a different type of leadership? One that isn't based on toxic masculinity to solve the country's problems? Louder laughter echoed through the crowd. The tension mounted once more. Some were ready to see Jimin stumble, justify his decisions, or try to soften his image. That's what Alejandra wanted. A viral quote, a moment that could turn into a headline. She wanted him to admit that his type of leadership, the firm one, was outdated. But Jimin didn't play that game. He didn't react. He didn't flinch. He simply let her words hang in the air, waiting for them to fade away on their own. The pause stretched. Seconds passed like minutes. Then Jimin leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, fixing his gaze on Alejandra. "Let me ask you something, Alejandra," he said, his voice steady and unshaken. "If someone were to break into your house tonight with bad intentions, would you prefer a poet or a protector to defend you?" The traditional leadership doesn't have a place in the modern world. Alejandra pressed on, "But your type of leadership, Jimin, doesn't seem to have a place in the modern world. Don't you think it's time to leave that behind?" Jimin didn't play into her game. He didn't react, didn't move. He let her words hang in the air, waiting for them to fade away on their own. The pause stretched, seconds feeling like minutes. Then Jimin leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on his knees, his gaze locked on Alejandra. The audience held its breath. "Let me ask you something, Alejandra," Jimin said, his tone calm, unwavering. "If someone were to break into your house tonight with bad intentions, would you prefer a poet or a protector to defend you?" The air in the studio thickened. A deep silence fell. Some members of the audience murmured, surprised. A few even clapped. Alejandra stood frozen for a moment, just long enough for the cameras to catch her hesitation. But she was good at this. She quickly recovered, letting out a light laugh and shaking her head as if Jimin had just said something adorably outdated. "That's a false equivalence, Jimin," she responded, though with slightly less confidence. "Society doesn't work like an old Western movie anymore." She glanced around the room looking for support from the audience, but the response wasn't what she expected. They were no longer laughing with her. Some shifted uncomfortably, others crossed their arms thoughtfully. Jimin narrowed his eyes slightly and smiled faintly. He wasn't finished. He didn't break his gaze, nor did he defend himself. Instead, he shattered the illusion. "Look at yourself," he said, his voice calm yet relentless. "Here you are, immaculate, secure, and comfortable in your studio because strong men and women built this country, and they continue to hold it up." Alejandra's smile tightened. He hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't attacked her. He had simply spoken the truth. And yet, he continued. Jimin, not moving a muscle, added, "You dare mock them?" A new silence fell, denser, more uncomfortable, an unforgettable silence. It swept over the room like a breeze passing through a closed hall. The audience began to stir in their seats. Some murmured under their breath. Others simply nodded in silent agreement. No one dared to break the moment. The impact of Jimin's words had struck deep. Alejandra Torres, used to having complete control over every interview, began to feel the power slipping from her grasp. She slid the cards in her hands, searching desperately for a new angle, any way to regain control of the conversation. But it was too late. She wasn't leading the interview anymore. It was now Jimin who set the pace, who dictated the tone. Everyone in the studio knew it, including her. Jimin hadn't planned this. He didn't need to. He wasn't nervous. He didn't feel cornered. On the contrary, he was completely at ease, in control of the situation, calm as always, but with the unshakable gaze of someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Desperate to regain control, Alejandra changed her strategy. Her last card, a personal attack. She leaned back in her chair, crossed her legs, and flashed the same smile she had used hundreds of times to disarm her guests without appearing aggressive. "Look, President Jimin," she began in a lighter, almost playful tone, but with a hint of condescension, "I truly respect your career, but don't you think it's time to step aside? Maybe let the younger generation take the reins?" Leadership and the changing dynamics of the interview. The audience laughed nervously. Some immediately noticed the change in tone. It was no longer an interview. It had turned into a subtle farewell disguised as a joke, a strategy to cast Jimin as a figure of the past. Alejandra smiled confidently, thinking she had regained control. That was her signature, making her guests seem irrelevant, a shadow of what they once were. But Jimin merely tilted his head slightly, letting a slow, confident smile appear on his face. He had seen this before. He knew exactly how to handle it. He didn't rush, didn't react. He simply nodded slowly as though he were truly considering her words. Then, with a firm yet calm voice, sharp as a knife, he replied, "How curious. I remember when people used to respect their elders instead of trying to replace them." The audience erupted into spontaneous, sincere applause. Alejandra's smile disappeared before she could hide it. Jimin leaned slightly forward, his gaze unwavering without hesitation. "The wisdom doesn't expire, my dear," he said, his words like a hammer falling on the room. The silence was deafening. Only those who think they know it all dare to ignore it. There were more sighs, more applause, more murmurs. The energy in the studio shifted completely. Alejandra opened her mouth, ready for a quick retort, but nothing came out. For the first time in her career, she was at a loss for words. The audience was no longer on her side. The cameras captured every second, the moment that would go viral. It had already happened. The interview wasn't even over, but the internet had already chosen its winner. Inside the studio, Alejandra tried to regain her composure. Her face remained expressionless, but inside it was a firestorm. Someone from the audience had already clipped the key moment and uploaded it to Twitter. Within minutes, the video exploded on social media. #Bukalev's Torres and #Never Underestimate Salvadoran Huellas es Dom quickly became global trends. Even traditional media couldn't ignore it. The next morning, every headline covered the exchange. Some celebrated, "Jimin proves why authentic leadership doesn't go out of style. You can't cancel a leader, only remind the world why they're respected." Others tried to defend Alejandra. An unfortunate moment for the journalist. Alejandra Torres challenged outdated ideas and received a toxic response. But the people's verdict was already clear. Even the same audience that once applauded Alejandra's every word was now questioning whether she was really as sharp as they had thought. Jimin, on the other hand, didn't tweet, make any statements, or celebrate. He didn't need to. Meanwhile, inside the Mundo Actual offices, chaos ensued. Urgent emails, crisis meetings. The PR team scrambled to put out the fire. The strategy was clear. Change the narrative. The official statement read, "We respect the president's career and vision, but we believe in the importance of maintaining conversations that reflect progress and inclusion. We encourage open dialogue about evolving social values." Translation, we lost and we know it. But the debate had already gone beyond the walls of the studio. Now it was something much bigger. Are classic values, firmness, and experience truly obsolete? Or have they simply become uncomfortable for those who can no longer control them? A conversation that transcended the screen. "It's important to have conversations that reflect progress and inclusion," said the official statement from the Mundo Actual channel. "We encourage open dialogue about the evolution of social values." But everyone knew what it really meant. They had lost, and they knew it. They tried to present the moment as problematic, attempting to convince the audience that what had happened was an overreaction, an outdated view with no place in modern society. But the public didn't buy it. The debate was no longer between Alejandra Torres and Jimin. It had become something much bigger, a national, even international conversation. Everyone wanted to have their say. Are we really so willing to discard traditional values? Are firmness, discipline, and responsibility outdated? Or are they more necessary than ever? What happened to respect for experience and wisdom? Jimin had entered that studio expecting just another ordinary interview with the same old questions, but he had ignited an unexpected cultural debate of massive proportions. And the most surprising part? He did it without raising his voice, without attacking anyone, and without falling into provocations. He simply said the right things at the right time. While media analysts and social media influencers dissected every second of the exchange, Jimin simply went on with his life. A week later, a reporter found him outside a small cafe in Seoul. He was alone, holding a cup of black coffee, sitting in front of a park, reading on his tablet. President Jimin, and the reporter asked, his phone already recording, "Do you have anything to say about the interview that went viral?" Jimin adjusted his jacket, took a sip of his coffee, and smiled faintly. "No," he said simply. And just like that, he stood up and walked away down the boulevard, without security, without the show, without any explanations. Because true legends don't need to justify themselves. They don't argue. They don't need to win on the internet. They simply stand firm. And sometimes that's all it takes to remind the world that strength, wisdom, and integrity never go out of style. But tell me, do the old ways no longer work, or do we need them more than ever? Let me know in the comments. And if you want to see another equally powerful story, subscribe, because I promise you won't want to miss the videos we'll upload every day. Take care and see you soon.